20 years after the disappearance of Holly Marie Simmons, prosecutors are dropping the charges against the man who was accused of killing her. This week, on Inside the Investigation, senior investigative producer David Barer takes us inside the case he's followed for over a decade and explains the challenges investigators have faced trying to find her killer. Welcome to Inside the Investigation. I'm investigative reporter Kelly Wiley here with my colleague David Barer. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And David, we're here to talk about a case that you've been following for a long time, the case of Holly Marie Simmons. Catch us up on this case.
Yeah, I've been following this since I started in 2015, and the case has been going on a lot longer than that. This goes back to 2006. Holly Marie Simmons, mother of four, she was about 45 years old at that time. She took a daughter to the bus stop in late November of that year, and her daughter went to school, and that was the last time Holly Simmons was ever seen alive that we know of. And so at that point, it was labeled a missing persons case. She lived in Buchanan Dam, which is northwest of Austin by Lake Buchanan. It's a very rural area. She was living in a cul-de-sac in a mobile home. There were a few other mobile homes there, and it was just, it was a mystery what had happened with her. I think her children at the time believed something very bad had happened, but police labeled it a missing person case. And it stayed that way until for 3 years, until 2009, when a scuba diver in Inks Lake found her body cemented into a boat that had been sunk beneath the an old bridge that went over the lake. And obviously at that point, when they pulled the boat out, police saw that she was cemented in there. They knew that this was not a missing person case anymore, that there was something very nefarious involved, and they began investigating it as a murder.
Wow. And so I'm so sure it was so hard for her family.
Yeah,
having to wait all this time, and then it kind of her body being found that way.
Yeah, it's been really hard for them. They've been seeking justice for 20 years now. There's a Facebook page called Seeking Justice for Holly Simmons. I think that's the name of it. And one of her daughters is one of the people running it. And anyway, you can go down and see years and years and years of posts and them, updating people who are interested in the case, friends and family, and then other people in general who are, interested in cold cases and, finding justice in those cases. And for years and years, they've been trying to push law enforcement to resolve this, find who did it, prosecute them. And so, yeah, it has been quite hard for them.
And so why has the case taken so long? It's been 20 years.
So a big problem with the case goes back to the beginning when, as I said, Holly Simmons went missing and the police treated it as a missing person case. So when that happens, the case is not investigated as if someone was killed. The police were not gathering evidence as if it was a murder. They weren't questioning people as if it was a murder. They weren't going through all those steps to, collect evidence and such that they needed to do because they didn't believe that she had been killed. They didn't have any body. So there was no effort done in that sense. 3 years later, when she was found, they had lost so much time. They had lost so much ability to gather evidence because it was pretty much all gone. They had very little to go on. They were unable to really track down the ownership of that John boat to find who had it last. So they were really struggling to, connect the dots. There was a little bit of evidence that police have alluded to that was found in the home, but they've been pretty tight about what all they've gathered and what evidence they have. But a big reason why the case has taken so long is, one, she wasn't found for 3 years, and then in that 3 years, no substantial investigation was done as if this was a murder.
So in 2015, you went out and investigated this case, and you went out to Buchanan Dam. Can you tell me about that investigation and what you learned then?
Yeah, so we went out in 2015, myself, an investigative reporter and photographer. We drove out there, we talked to people that lived in the area, we looked at all the evidence we could get. We interviewed the sheriff at the time, and we learned a lot about what they were doing. The case was still pending. Law enforcement was treating it as an open investigation, but they didn't have a lot of details. What the sheriff said is, at that point, they were waiting for someone essentially to come forward and give them more information, confess, or say that someone knew something and they were waiting for them to tell it to them, which is not a great point in an investigation.
Not a great tactic, yeah.
No, you're hoping. And so after we did that investigation, the Texas Rangers stepped in and they reinvestigated the case. That led to an indictment of Holly Simmons' landlord at the time, whose name was Jimmy Wolfenbarger.
Interesting. Okay, so the Texas Rangers picked up the investigation after your 2015 report. They investigated it as a cold case, and this Jimmy Wolfenbarger was indicted. Talk to us more about that and who he is to this.
Yeah, so he was her landlord, and he was living in the area at the time. The indictment said that she was killed by being strangled with a ligature or some other type of instrument, but there wasn't a lot of details beyond that about what had happened, not in the indictment and not that have really come out in court or anywhere else. The prosecutors told us they were working on getting DNA evidence tested from the boat or the crime scene, but it's not clear whatever came of that either. So in the years since Wolfenbarger was indicted and now, there's not a lot of information that's come out other than the prosecutors and police thought it was him, he was their prime suspect, and he was charged. But beyond that, there's not a whole lot of information for us.
So then that takes us to last week. Tell us what happened in the case.
Yeah, so, and I'll even go back a little bit. When he was originally indicted, Wolfenbarger, there was a DA named Sonny McAfee who was in charge of the prosecution. Since then, Sonny McAfee retired and a new prosecutor, DA, came in that's in charge of everything. So last week, the charges were dismissed. The charge was dismissed. The district attorney told me, the district attorney's name is Perry Thomas. He told me that the notation in the dismissal would read, "in the interest of justice." That doesn't give us a lot of information about the reason why they dismissed it.
Right.
But they didn't feel confident going to trial. When the case was dismissed, when they told us the case was dismissed, the next day was the deadline for a plea agreement. So they were, and then in 2 weeks or less, the case was scheduled to go to trial. So they were very close to the trial, and they were at basically the plea deadline. So this thing was coming to a head, and the trial had been postponed multiple times already. I don't remember the year. I think it was at least 2 years before when they were originally thinking they were going to go to trial, and they didn't, and it's been postponed. So they were at the point where they were going to take this thing all the way, and the district attorney clearly didn't feel comfortable doing that because the case is dismissed, and the trial was canceled.
Which, I mean, it's been 20 years. This family has gone through it, right? It's been a missing persons case for years. Their mother's body was found, and now they're thinking that this is moving forward, and now to see the charges dropped, have you gotten a chance to touch base with them and hear how they're doing with this information.
We've talked to one of the daughters of Holly Simmons. She came and did a brief interview with us, and she has been, from what I understand and what she's told me, really pushing to have this prosecution done. And she said she was basically at peace with it, and that she wanted, when this case goes to trial, for it to be, for the prosecutor to be able to win. So if they weren't comfortable feeling like they were going to win, then she, I guess, wanted more for them to take time or not do it, rather than have a bad outcome from her perspective. Mm-hmm. So, I think it's been so long for them that I guess she was feeling a little relief that she's not like in this constant update phase of being, are we going to trial, are we not, why aren't we going to trial, and all of that. I know that her family really wanted, we went to Florida. I didn't go, actually. Our photojournalist and investigative reporter went to Florida in 2015 and interviewed Holly Simmons' sister and brother, and they really wanted justice. They were and have been very upset about the whole thing for all this time. And I can't really imagine the weight that has on you, and to have it just lingering and unresolved and at the edge then for years of, there's an indictment, are we going to get to a point where this is finally done and we can have some closure? And they, back in 2015, there was no indictment, there was no really much information at all. So now it's kind of back to where they were again. So that's kind of the state of affairs with the family. I haven't talked to all of her kids, and I haven't spoken with the sister and brother again since the murder charge was dismissed. But you can only imagine they're disappointed. When they interviewed with us after the indictment came down, they were happy that something had happened and that it looked like there was some light at the end of the tunnel with getting to justice.
It's heavy, and it's such a window into our justice system and how it can look for families realistically when violence like this happens, and when there are issues with the case and issues with finding evidence. What is next? Because you kind of mentioned that at least one of her daughter's perspective was, if you don't have it and you don't feel confident going to trial, it maybe, her perspective was kind of then don't, or maybe it's better not to. What's next?
So that's a good question. While the case is dismissed, the district attorney told us they're still investigating, and he's treating it as an open investigation. So the case isn't closed, it's just, in a way, the trial won't happen, the charges against Jimmy Wolfenbarger have been dropped. But the DA and law enforcement are still going to investigate it. The Rangers responded to a request for comment from us on this, and they said they're still investigating it, and Jimmy Wolfenbarger is the only suspect that they have at this time. And they asked for anyone with information on the case to reach out to them. So it looks like we may be back in the spot where the sheriff was in 2015 when he said, we're hoping for someone to come forward with information. But again, we don't know what the DNA testing revealed. We just know that the DA told us that they were doing DNA testing. Perhaps it wasn't much, given that they canceled the trial and dismissed the charges, but we don't know. We also don't know all of the cards that they have in their hand. So we'll just have to wait and see if anything new comes up. Beyond that, the case, there is no murder charge anymore, and police remain investigating.
My last question, have we heard it all from Jimmy Wolfenbarger? Did he have anything to say after the charge was dismissed?
We have not. I reached out to his attorney when the indictment happened, in subsequent reporting, and then after the charge was dismissed, and we have not heard back.
Well, David, thank you so much for staying on this case over the years, and for, it seems like there's more for you to follow, and there'll be more that at least the DA and state law enforcement says they're working on, so we know you'll stay on it. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
You can watch all new episodes of Inside the Investigation on the KXAN Plus app every Friday starting at 1 p.m. Just search for KXAN on your preferred streaming devices, such as Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire TV. You can also listen to KXAN's Investigative podcast, where we feature audio versions of our weekly Inside the Investigation episodes. You can find new episodes every Saturday morning wherever you get podcasts. Just search for KXAN Investigates.